Tigers and sharks and octopus wars, oh my. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, I've put them off long enough. It's time for the third in the unofficial trilogy of the Rankin Bassiverse, TigerSharks, namely Octavia and Angel. After their success with Thundercats and a little less so Silverhawks, Rankin Bass decided to, move forward with another, human-animal hybrid cartoon with TigerSharks. TigerSharks would debut in 1987 as part as a cartoon strip series of shorts, including, Karate Cats and some other cartoons that are also barely worth mentioning. The TigerSharks storyline itself is a bit of a strange one. So they were a bit of a crew of humans and aliens somewhere in the near future who traveled to a planet called Wataro, or Wataro if you're an ignoramus like me. They were there for either research or salvaging. It's not really, terribly easy to pin that down. While they're there, there's, a series of mishaps where they say, hey, let's just become superheroes at the same time. Aboard their spaceship, which is also a submarine, called the Sark, they have inside essentially a giant vat of, mutating goodness, this thing called the fish tank, where their human forms could be transformed into more of an aquatic creature that coincidentally really matched their names, so that's handy. They would go on to, protect Watero and its citizens from Pirate Captain Bizzerly or T-Ray and his Mantennas. They had at least a wide assortment of villains, not just sort of, beat for beat the same guys each episode. Because this was a third of a sort of, animalistic humanoid cartoon made by Rankin Bass with the same animators, with a lot of the same voice cast as Thundercats and Silverhawks. It's really kind of considered, a part of that universe, unofficially or not, by the fans. Unfortunately, all these cartoons really were diminishing returns, so Thundercats was a real, smash success, right smack in the middle of the 80s. Silverhawks certainly is known by some diehard fans, but less successful than Thundercats, and TigerSharks itself is flash and you miss it. I mean, admittedly, I either missed it or it wasn't on my channels that I got as a kid. I don't remember anyone talking about it. It's a real flash in the pan. I knew of it. I saw ads for it. I was aware of its existence, but I mean, until this video, I never watched a single episode, and kind of wish I still didn't. Although Kenner would make toys for Silverhawks, LJN would make toys for TigerSharks, much like they did with Thundercats. Similar, let's say, build and style as Thundercats. So, I mean, again, that sort of link between the two is kind of baked in, at least with the toys under LJN. These toys, I can't find a single example of why they were so hard to find. I mean, it could be that they were just an incredibly low run. It could be that the show, tanked, so, they reduced the numbers, or they shunted it off to Europe and Canada, much like Galaxy Rangers or something. But I don't know. I mean, and that thing is, there's not a lot of information on TigerSharks to really sort of get a big deep dive into. I mean, any research I've done is incredibly surface, being like, they're rare, they're expensive now. That's it. Of the original line, I would say all of the main male characters from the TigerSharks and a few villains were made in that first very limited run series. Shockingly enough, not one of the two main women were included in that. And I've got, mixed feelings on that. It's sort of, a surprise, but also not at the same time. Of the MIA ladies in questions, this would be Octavia and Angel. Octavia being very much the Chitara or Steelheart of the group. I mean, a very, kind of sexed up character. She was, I would say, probably alien-ish, and would transform into kind of an octopus creature where her hair would turn into tentacles. I think you know where I'm going with this. The other was one of the teenage characters called Angel, who, shockingly, was more of an angelfish. The two of them, had a bit of a Chitara Wily Kid thing happening there. Octavia too, I mean, I mentioned she's sort of, the sexy of the bunch, and you might be sitting there thinking, it's a cartoon, they're not sexy. I implore you, to go look at the intros for Thundercats, TigerSharks, Silverhawks. Look at Chitara, look at Steelheart, look at Octavia, and look how the camera just lingers on their bodies. If that's not enough to convince you, I also invite you to go to DeviantArt and look up those names, and you're welcome. Just for the sake of being thorough, I will mention that one of the members of the pyro crew was a woman named Soulmate, who had a very kind of cool samurai look. Neither LJN nor Kenner were terribly fond of making women characters from the supporting cast or from villains. So, I mean, I'm not surprised that she's not on the board or was not made a figure, and she's not getting her own video. But I will say, would be a cool figure. As I mentioned before, this is sort of, a surprise, but also not why the women weren't made in this line. It's a surprise in the sense that LJN, while not making supporting characters or villains, was real, hardcore about making the heroic women from Thundercats. So we got Chitara, we got a little slug of, Wily Kid with her, we got a fully articulated Wily Kid later on, we got Pumaira. They weren't afraid of women in the sense that Hasbro was, particularly at this time. I think the real problem here is that each of the figures had a bit of a head-flipping gimmick where their, essentially their chest would pop out, the head would rotate, so they would go from human form to their more, kind of super heroic marine life form. This would be done later on with more success, let's say with Ninja Turtles, but in particular the auto-morphing Power Rangers figures. This gimmick is a little engineering heavy, and also, over the years, very fragile, which makes an actual complete TigerSharks figure very hard to find. I think part of the problem here is that, you've got these sort of smaller, slimmer, diminutive characters, and to actually incorporate that kind of engineering into their smaller frames would be a bit of a nightmare. Further to that, we are in 1987, so we are getting into that sort of, no girls allowed club Hasbro was really leading the charge on for the next couple of years. So a bit of a disappointment, a bit of a surprise, but also, just based off of the actual engineering involved in making the figures and the era we are getting into, unfortunate, but not surprising. All that is to say, TigerSharks was pretty much shot in the foot before it even got off the ground. Before it even aired, Rankin Bass was pretty much done. They closed shop in 1987. Likewise, success is sort of measured in the 80s based off of the cartoon and the toy line that supports it, but also lunchboxes, cake pans, Valentine's Day cards, all of it. You will not find much from TigerSharks. Maybe a lunchbox. That's about it. There's really, a real drought of supporting materials in it, and I think that really speaks more to how there was no faith in it, but also, it was dead in the water, to coin a term, before it even started. The final verdict is an odd one, and it's one of the reasons I've been sort of holding off on doing this, much requested and beloved in some circles franchise. So they've not really flourished in the same sense that Thundercats has, who themselves, I wouldn't say have flourished in the same way that He-Man or Star Wars or any other, the big dogs from the 80s have. Their only real notable mainstream attention was a blink and you miss a cameo in the 2011 Thundercats series, where they were sort of amongst, a few cameos alongside some, Silverhawks ones as well. Beyond that, their success really hinges on being, the third in the trilogy, the red-headed stepchild to the other two. On that note, so of course, Thundercats and Silverhawks are part of the domain of Super 7 currently. Super 7 and Brian Flynn have been a little cagey on what kind of rights or even ownership they have of these cartoons and action figures, but they've very much been in the Thundercats game for quite some time now. They're pumping out some, I think, really fun, if not very fragile, Silverhawks. And so, everyone has been talking, especially since Silverhawks was first announced, when we get in TigerSharks. Who these people are, I don't know. But there's been, an appetite for them. And since then, they've confirmed it. But have they? And, it's rumored, and it's also, we're for sure doing it, but when? Super 7's in a very strange spot as of the very, early parts of 2025. They have really scaled back their pre-order model from during the pandemic, where it seemed, every month there was a new wave of something coming out, stacked over another, and there was a huge laundry list of pre-orders that were outstanding. If you check their website right now, they're currently almost caught up with pre-orders, and at the same time, they're also seemingly making a push for scaled down re-releases of their Ultimates figures at retail. So it's really hard to know what Super 7's business model or what their priorities are, but there is certainly, a bit of a waiting game to see when and how these will be made. I would assume, much like Silverhawks, they would be a pre-order basis. I mean, they really want to gauge what the actual numbers of fans who are willing to spend money on a very expensive Ultimates figure is. So time and tide will tell. I mean, time of recording, we'll be getting to New York Toy Fair in a few months, so we'll see if maybe there's a big announcement there. But frankly, I just got tired of waiting, and I've been wanting to talk about these for quite some time. I do actually really quite enjoy the looks of the characters. They are, again, very kind of like in that sexy camp, but also just great designs from Rankin Bass. So I'd like to see it. Prove me wrong, Super 7, but currently nothing officially confirmed on the table, ready to pre-order, in your hands, none of that. And that's it for now for Octavia and Angel and Soulmate from TigerSharks. Again, really unfortunate that these characters weren't made. It seems more of a lack of faith in the property, which wasn't completely unfounded. But nevertheless, still not a cute look for LJN to at least leave out Octavia, if not have a little, slug figure of Angel alongside her, much like Wily Kid originally was envisioned as. So, we'll see. By year end, I might have a bit of an update. Or not. We'll see how Super 7 plays this. But in the meantime, I thank you for watching, for commenting, for liking, for all those YouTube things, and I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.